Introduction to the IELTS speaking test. In this video, I'm going to be talking about things like what sort of questions is the examiner going to ask me? How should I respond to these questions? And how will I be graded and assessed by the examiner? It's really important that you understand these things because that way when you take your test, you'll be more relaxed because you'll know what's going to happen. You're also going to be able to get a higher score if you're familiar with the test and know how to respond to the questions that get asked. Stick around to the end. If you do, I'm going to give you a special gift at the end of this video. There are four main parts to this presentation. First of all, I'm going to talk about what's special about IELTS and how is the IELTS test different to other English language tests. Then I'm going to give you an overview of the three parts of the exam. I'll move on and talk about grading. Now this is vitally important. You must understand how you're going to be graded so you know how to prepare and how to perform during your test. Then I'm going to talk some more about preparing for your test and how to use your time effectively in order to get the grade that you need. One of the special aspects of the IELTS test that differentiates it from many of the other types of English language tests is that it's a face-to-face speaking test. You're going to sit face-to-face to a human examiner who's going to evaluate you. This is quite different than sitting and being recorded onto a computer. Talking into a microphone to be recorded onto a computer can be quite impersonal, and a lot of students have told me they prefer the IELTS test because of the fact that they're talking to a person, a human, and not a computer. In an IELTS test, 4 skills are tested: listening, reading, writing, and speaking. There are 2 versions. There's an academic version and a general version. However, the speaking test is the same for both versions. The speaking test will be 11 to 14 minutes long, and it's divided into 3 parts. Let's start off and have a look at the requirement in the first part of the test. The first part of the test involves general questions about you. It's designed to be 4 to 5 minutes long. You're going to be required to answer up to 4 questions for 3 different topics. You should try and speak for about 2 to 4 sentences for each question. About 3 sentences on average is right for most people. However, if you're a fast speaker and you're trying to get a high score, you may need an average of 4 sentences for each question. Let's now look at the requirement in part 2 of your test. Part 2 is called the long turn. It lasts for about 3 to 4 minutes. The examiner will hand you a card or a booklet with a topic on it and a pencil and paper for making notes. You have 1 minute to prepare for the topic. You're asked to speak for 1 to 2 minutes. Ideally, you should speak for at least 1.5 minutes. 2 minutes is ideal. 1 minute is a bit short unless you're just trying to get a low score of 5 or 6. You may be asked 1 or 2 rounding off questions at the end of your answer. You should keep your answer to these brief. Let's now look at the requirement in part 3 of your test. Now this is called a discussion. Ideally, it's a discussion between you and the examiner. In reality, it's really just the examiner asking you questions and you answering them. There's no real discussion going on here, but that's the intention. This part lasts 4 to 5 minutes. You should respond to the examiner's questions. These will be related to your topic in part 2. Try to speak for about 4 to 6 sentences for each question. An average of 5 sentences will be long enough for most people. People who speak quickly may need an average of 6 sentences. In part 3, you should talk about people in general and not yourself. Part 3 is designed to be about other people, whereas part 1 and 2 are about you. You're going to be given a score on your test from 1 to 9. Let's get an idea of what these scores represent. A 9 is an expert user. You can think of a native speaker here. To get this score, you should perform similar to a native speaker. An 8 is a very good user. An 8 is highly fluent, although the odd mistake is noticeable. A 7 is a very good user. They're highly fluent with basic and advanced topics, although errors are noticeable. They do not impede communication. A 6 is a competent user. They're highly fluent with basic topics, but may start to struggle a bit with more advanced topics. Mistakes are noticeable and sometimes interfere with communication. A 5 is a modest user. They can communicate well on basic questions. More advanced questions may start to cause some trouble. A 4 is a limited user. They can communicate on basic questions, but more advanced questions start to cause trouble and may even be unable to be answered by this level of a user. We won't go too far further on the scale. The score that you are given is actually made up of 4 different components, and each of these is worth 25%. These 4 components are fluency and coherence, vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. Let's look at fluency and coherence in a bit more detail. The examiner will look at the length of your answers. You need to show that you can give extended answers. Your speaking speed is important. You can't score well if you speak too slowly. Speaking fast can also be a problem for coherence. I suggest you speak at your normal speaking speed. Try to avoid hesitations. Sometimes these may be unavoidable when you're trying to think of what to say, but try and avoid mid-sentence hesitations where you're trying to think of vocabulary or grammar to complete your sentence. These will lower your score here. You should also show the examiner that you have a wide range of connectives and linking words. This is particularly important for the coherence aspect. Let's now look at pronunciation. I want to let you know what the examiner is thinking about here. First of all, they're looking for problems with specific sounds. Now, a lot of these errors will depend on what country you come from. Vietnamese students often have trouble with S and SH and confusing these two sounds. Japanese have problems with R's and L's. Chinese often have problems with TH sound in the words such as think or that. The examiner's also going to be looking to see whether you stress syllables, words and sentences. This is important to get higher scores for pronunciation. These are features of native speakers. The examiner's also going to be listening for intonation and whether you use intonation correctly. For instance, our intonation often falls at the end of a sentence. This sends a signal to the listener that we've finished what we have to say. When it comes to vocabulary, there are a few key aspects. First of all, you should avoid errors with word choices. You should be using the correct words, and if you use words incorrectly, you're going to lower your score. You should also avoid errors with word forms. If we take a word like manage or management, manage is a verb, management is a noun. If you confuse these, you're going to lower your score. To get a high score of 7 or more, you also have to show talent to the examiner. You have to show the examiner that you have a wide range of vocabulary. The examiner is looking for things like idiomatic expressions, and adjectives can be particularly useful in part 2 of the test. For instance, we could describe a person as an introvert, a shy person, or an extrovert, an outgoing person. Turning to grammar, there are a couple of key considerations here. First of all, you should avoid errors. Errors will lower your score. The more serious the error, in terms of its communicative impact, the lower your score will be. You also need to show talent in this area to the examiner to get to 7 and beyond. The examiner is particularly looking for complex sentences. Complex sentences are where we have a dependent clause and an independent clause in the sentence. Common complex sentences include things like conditionals, if phrases, and sentences that use relative clauses in them. Relative clauses are things like who, which, that. Now I want to talk about how you can improve your score. First of all, you need to understand how the test is graded. This is extremely important because it will determine how you should perform in the test. You should prepare and practice common questions that get asked in the test. You should learn ways of structuring your answers to extend your answers and improve your coherence. You should learn to paraphrase, which is when you use a phrase to explain a word you can't think of. This can get you out of trouble in your test. It also shows talent to the examiner. You should improve your pronunciation by ensuring you can make all sounds correctly and also have natural sounding speech. You should improve your grammar by correcting frequent errors and learning to use a couple of complex sentence structures. You should broaden your vocabulary, especially adjectives for part 2 of the test and idiomatic language. Thanks for sticking around to the end of this video. As I mentioned at the start, I've got a special gift for you. I've got a free PDF for you to download that's over 140 pages long. Please see the link at the end of this video in order to download your ebook. It includes model answers for many questions that occur in your speaking test and also your writing test. As well as this, there's some suggestions about how to prepare for all 4 parts of your IELTS speaking test. If you found this video useful, please subscribe to my channel so you can get all the updates for new videos that I'm making. As well as this, I'll put a couple of links at the end of this video to similar videos that you might like to check out and watch as well. Good luck with your studies.